Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Rae, and you're listening to the Seleção podcast.
Simões bending one for Torres. Eusebio. Oh my word! Have you ever seen anything like that?
Bem jogado por Simão, a passar por dois adversários. Simão a tentar oferecer o gol a Figo e a bola é gol! O gol de Figo!
Rui Costa já acreditou, vai tirar para o golo, atira golo! 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 Cristiano Ronaldo, vai embora Cristiano Ronaldo, mete, bateu, golo! Ronaldo! Obrigado, Cristiano! Portugal vai Éder, chuta! Gol!
And we welcome you to episode number 71 of the Seleção podcast, a proud partner of Portugal.net. My name is Danny Pinto. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for tuning in once again. And what an absolute tremendous episode we have in store for you, as not only do we have, to celebrate our Seleção making it to the round of 16, one of only 3 teams to win their first 2 matches. Joining Brazil, joining France. We obviously do not want to join Brazil in the round of 16 on Saturday. We'll get to that later on this week, but it is an absolute thrill and a pleasure to have one of the voices of the World Cup for Fox Sports here in the States. Derek Rae is kind enough to join us here from Qatar and talk to us a little bit about the World Cup. Derek, Danny Pinto here in California. Just an absolute pleasure to have you on.
The pleasure is all mine, Danny. Thank you very much for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, first things first, how has this World Cup in Qatar, as far as atmosphere and fans and stadiums and the whole, just the whole thing, how has that compared to World Cups in the past that you've covered and commented on?
I think the honest answer is it has been different, and I've covered every World Cup in one capacity or another since 1990, and it was always going to be different. And I think one of the things that you notice is that, for example, a country like Portugal, were this in Europe or in the United States, Canada, Mexico, which we'll have in 2026, then you would have a lot more Portuguese fans, for example. So it's just a different experience. It's a different time frame. We're not used to a World Cup in winter. And so there's been a lot of getting used to the differences. I think that would be the way I would put it.
How have you enjoyed working once again with former U.S. national team member and midfielder for the women's side, Ali Wagner? I know you guys worked together at the World Cup in Russia in 2018. Forgive my ignorance. Not sure if you worked together in 2019 for the Women's World Cup, but how has reuniting with Ali been in Qatar?
It's been great fun. And we didn't work together in 2019 in France, but you're right, we worked together in Russia in 2018. And it's something that I think we worked on ahead of that tournament. We haven't had to work on it so much prior to this one because we know each other a lot better now. And yeah, great respect for Ali and her knowledge of the game and the eye that she has for the game. She's played it at a high level. I haven't, but I have commentated on it for quite a long time at the international level. So hopefully it makes for a good team. We bring different strengths to the equation and very much enjoy her company. We always try to have a bit of a laugh, not at the expense of the game, because that is the serious business, but in a lighter moment, a little chuckle, and personalities hopefully come through. And it's teamwork, really. I always say when you work with a good co-commentator, it's a bit like 2 centre-backs working together or 2 strikers with maybe complementary skills, and you try to get into a situation whereby those skills come to the fore. So I'm always thinking about, when to bring in Ali. Obviously, she doesn't need to be brought in because she can come whenever she wants, but thinking about the dynamic so that we also don't overtalk during a game, because that's really important from the point of view of viewers. We don't want to drown them in information at the expense of the atmosphere at the games. But no, it has been great fun, and we've done now, as I talk to you, I think 7 games together now in this World Cup, as well as many at the last one, and the journey continues.
Yeah, you and Ali will be the only team that will get Portugal twice during group play. Obviously, we have you on here to speak a little bit on the Seleção and their play in the World Cup thus far. Coming into the World Cup, have they played Portugal? Have they played to your expectation? And how do you differ, or how does it differ? How does it differ with the way the tournament has gone? Preparing for Portugal with their first match against Ghana, and now 2 matches passed, and now they've qualified for the under 16. How does your preparation as a play-by-play man differ with the game coming up on Friday, which you guys will be on the call for Fox Sports against South Korea?
Yes, and looking forward to commentating on that game. It's a good question, Danny, because we do prepare differently according to the stages of the tournament. I always think that once the tournament is underway, the narrative does change and the focus changes a little bit. When we cover a team for the first time in a tournament, sometimes I always feel that what we're talking about might relate more to what the players have been doing in the club seasons, or some general notes about the players. But as we move from game to game, I think it's important to focus on the tournament and what they've done in the tournament. And maybe an anecdote I would tell about a player and something that he did when he was 7 or 8 years old. I might still tell that, but I'd be more likely to tell that story in the first match of the tournament. And I think as well, once you get to a situation where with Portugal, they are already through to the knockout stages, then we have to prepare for the possibility that Fernando Santos might change the team quite radically. We might see players who we haven't seen before. So that is all part of the preparation. But it's really just immersing yourself in the teams. And of course, it's what I do for a living day in, day out, but not on the intense basis that we have during a World Cup. As I mentioned to you, Ali and I have done 7 games together, but it's 7 games in just over a week,
Sure.
So not much pause for thought. As a Portugal fan, you have the luxury of being able to digest what's happening with Portugal every second of every minute, if you like. That can be your World Cup experience. If Scotland were in the World Cup and I were a fan, and we haven't been to the World Cup, sadly, since 1998, I would be living it on that basis too. But as a commentator, we have to multitask, and we have to switch our focus. For example, today, I'll be getting my head into Costa Rica, Germany, which is my Thursday game, as well as Portugal and South Korea, and probably doing a bit more on South Korea than on Portugal, because I haven't done them yet in this tournament, done them before in previous World Cups. Whereas, as you mentioned, we did the Portugal-Ghana game, which was enjoyable. After a slow start to the match, it didn't really take off until the second half. But every game has its own vibe. And I think neutrals who watched the second half of that Portugal-Ghana game certainly, they relayed to me that they thoroughly enjoyed it.
We're talking with Derek Rae, the great Derek Rae, play-by-play announcer for Fox Sports at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. He is kind enough to give us some time here on episode number 71 of the Seleção podcast. Kind of piggybacking on what you were saying in terms of preparation, Derek. It's a shame Portugal didn't give you guys any off the field or crazy stories heading into the World Cup.
Well, this is the thing with Portugal. You do sort of expect, with a certain number 7, you do expect that there will be these other stories. I think as a commentator, funnily enough, on the one hand, they are grist to a commentator's mill. But on the other hand, I always, if anything, try to go the other direction a little bit and tell the stories of the other players who don't get the same publicity as Cristiano. So that is part of the job as well. But I think we know that when you have a Seleção game, that there are going to be these stories, and they certainly engage people. And Portugal's a great football country. I always have to sort of remind myself that when I was growing up, Portugal didn't make it to the World Cup often enough. There was that sort of long, barren period for whatever reason. And it was obviously before Ronaldo that got corrected. When you think of the generation immediately before Ronaldo and a player like Luis Figo, we're talking about real quality. But yes, sort of a certain soap opera element to the whole thing, but never taking away from the fact that this is a capable team. I think, and if I can say this as an outsider, I think if anything, Portugal sort of sometimes defy logic for people who are not Portuguese, maybe for people who are Portuguese as well. And I say that because, I look at the squad and I look at the team and I always think this should be one of the most dynamic, most eye-catching teams in the competition. And they can be, but sometimes the tactics are conservative with a small c, and I do think that is down to Fernando Santos, and of course he's been able to buy himself all this time through winning the Euro in 2016, and you can't argue with that. The most successful coach ever for the Seleção. So all these narratives have to be weaved in and taken into account when covering Portugal, and they're certainly in the conversation with regard to teams that can go far at this World Cup.
Well, that outsider point of view is not foreign to us insiders, I guess, because we see the talent that is on paper and what it could be potentially, and the pragmatic style that Fernando Santos has displayed and has executed since 2016. It's kind of been the same. So there's a little bit of frustration at times from the fan base, myself included, with how they go about things, but in terms of what they can do, I'm of the opinion that they can go far in this World Cup if, the reliance on a certain number 7 isn't as much as it maybe has needed to be in the past, and that's shown with players like Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva. And it's Derek. It's a good time to be a Seleção fan in terms of seeing what this team can do, but as always, we are at the mercy of the football gods, and we'll see how it goes Friday for both Group H and Group G as well. So, the last thing I'd like to ask you about in terms of the World Cup, obviously we're a Portuguese national team podcast, but I'm based here in the United States. You can see behind me, I've got the Portugal and the U.S. jersey. The U.S. jersey making its first appearance on this Seleção podcast, and of course, with the U.S. making it to the round of 16, it's huge news here in the States. And in talking with you, or in talking about how you and Ali have Portugal twice, and you're the only team that has them twice. You're the only team that has the Netherlands in all 3 games. You've had them all for all 3 group matches. For us Portuguese Americans who are supporting both Portugal and the U.S. In terms of the opponent for the U.S. on Saturday, the Netherlands. What kind of an opponent are the Stars and Stripes looking at on Saturday in the round of 16?
Well, I would say, first of all, they're looking at a team that can be beaten. And I really mean that. If you look at the points total, you would say, okay, the Netherlands, 7 points out of 9. They got through the group with relative ease. But if you had watched the games, and as you mentioned, Ali and I commentated on all 3, they were not that impressive, especially in the middle game against Ecuador, completely outplayed for really most of that game. In fact, if you want to go purely by shots or attempts, it was 15-2 in Ecuador's favor. And the first game against Senegal, similar story. They were outshot. Again, doesn't come down just to shots in a game. It doesn't always tell you the whole story, but labored performance, I would have said, against Senegal, and a poor performance against Ecuador. Against Qatar in the third game, they were slightly better, but to be honest, Qatar didn't offer very much. So it's difficult to get a read on them. At times it's been slow and ponderous, but if we want to talk about their skills, they do have plenty of skills. And Frenkie de Jong, I think, is the obvious one who has to be focused on, because he is a player who can decide a game on his own with his passing ability, with his vision. He's sometimes able to just take the ball for a bit of a walk and, beat a couple of players. So, he's somebody who clearly will have to be identified as a danger man. And you have Memphis Depay, who's been injured, and they've been working him back to full fitness. 28 minutes in the first game, 45 in the second, and then played most of the game, or at least into the second half, as a starter in the third match. And, then again, it's a bit like Portugal. You look at the individuals and you say, Virgil van Dijk, Frankie de Jong, Daley Blind, Memphis Depay, Cody Gakpo, who's really burst onto the scene and 3 goals already at this World Cup. He's somebody who, again, the US will have to be mindful of, can decide a game, and he can score goals, he can tee up chances and goals as well. And so, looking at that, you would sort of think, yeah, this is a pretty competent team, but they have mistakes in them and they have casual qualities about them. Seen it in most of the games, just switching off for a second and almost allowing the opposition in. De Jong did it in one of the games, the first game, in fact, and almost they almost conceded a goal on the back of it. So what I would say is that of the teams that the US could have played as a runner-up against a team that won its group, this is probably a good draw. Does that mean that I make the US favorites? Probably not.
Sure.
But I think it's close, I think they do have more than a fighting chance, and I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I wouldn't predict too many goals. I don't think this Dutch team is that sort of team that's going to sweep aside the opposition. But, with defenders like Ake, with Van Dijk and Timber, who's been playing as opposed to De Ligt, who had a nightmare in the first game, it'll take something special from the US. But they are capable, and wouldn't be shocked if this goes to extra time.
I know we're catching you on a much deserved day off, and by the time you are done with the Portugal-South Korea match, I believe you'll be have completed 9 matches in 11 days.
Yeah.
Besides hanging out with Ian Dark on your off days,
yes, my best friend.
what have you enjoyed on your days off in Qatar?
To be honest, there hasn't been much time for anything other than the serious business of work, and
of course, this podcast, right, Derek?
This podcast, of course, this is little time off enjoyment. But yeah, later in the tournament, when the games thin out, that's sometimes when you can do things that are a bit more leisurely. But to be honest, we got here, we were straight into meetings. We obviously then go straight into the games, and people sort of imagine this life of glamour that we live, and it's a great privilege, of course, to cover major tournaments. But the job itself is very much you do a game which you prepared for, and then you maybe take a mental break for half an hour or an hour, and you're into your books preparing for the next match. And so even though today's a day off, I'm going to go to the press conferences of both Germany and Costa Rica ahead of my game tomorrow, and I'll be working on Portugal and the Korea Republic, and even looking ahead to the knockout stages, not knowing at the moment what games I might be covering, but just having half an eye on that. So it is a pretty intensive workload, but we love it, and that's why we do the job. And I have to say, it's a great thrill to do Portugal, to do these games. As you know, I don't speak Portuguese. I speak some other languages, but I do try to, as much as possible, remain true to Portuguese pronunciations of names, something that's very dear to my heart. And you were very nice in saying that you noticed that. So yeah, we'll try to produce more of that. I know that the Anglo audience doesn't always appreciate it because they're used to hearing Portuguese names often said in a different way. But anybody who plays the FIFA video game will know that I try to be as true as possible to authentic pronunciations. And so once again, it will be Bruno Fernandes and various other pronunciations that are Portuguese pronunciations.
I was gonna get to the pronunciations. Easy for me to pronounce, but you brought it up, so I kind of want to get to it right now. You mentioned how it was a I think there was an article from the Boston Globe in 2005 that I pulled up here, and it says that Ian is so particular about pronouncing a player's name correctly that he has been known to call consulates to confirm intonation. Excuse me. And that's obviously one of the things that kind of connected us on social media and getting you on this podcast. And you mentioned leading up to the Portugal and Ghana match. And this is directly from your tweet. It says, as always with Portugal, you may hear me pronounce one or two names slightly differently in comparison with the Anglo-Orthodox out of respect for the many Portuguese viewers, end quote. And as a Portuguese American, I try to do my best with this podcast, with the language and the pronunciation of names and cities and teams. But simply to you, I just want to say a simple obrigado, because the respect that it shows for the language, for the viewers, and in a larger way for your craft. As a fan, it's so appreciative because I think it just leaps off the screen. It leaps off leaps off the radio. And I really don't have a question for you on this. It's just simply just to say a muito obrigado to Derek, because I just think it's very much appreciated in our community and everybody who watches and supports Portuguese football, who watches it in an English speaking network or on an English speaking network.
Well, all I can say is thank you. It really started for me on the Portuguese side when I lived in Scotland as a youngster growing up. We used to be able to get Antena on the radio.
All right.
So I used to listen to, and then I befriended a couple of the commentators from Antena when I would travel to cover Scottish teams in Europe, and a couple of trips to Portugal for games against Boavista and Benfica. And I would hear how they were pronouncing the names, and I would realize that in the Anglo world, we were completely getting Portuguese sounds wrong. And I know it's not an easy sound, or these sounds are not, organic sounds for an English speaker. So you've got to practice them a little bit. But I always actually found that I found them quite interesting sounds, the sort of the nasal and the sh sound and all the things that go into making Portuguese a beautiful sounding language. And the thing with Bruno is that I recorded his name for the FIFA video game before he was famous with Manchester United. So nobody said anything to me at all in the Anglo world about this pronunciation until he joined Manchester United. And as I say, his name has been said more in a Spanish way in the UK, but of course I don't, for the FIFA video game, the way I recorded it originally is still the way that it is reflected on the video game. So I've always just thought this when he is playing for Portugal, especially, and Portuguese people are watching. It stands to reason that they might like to hear the name pronounced that way. And I feel the same way as a Scot, because I grew up hearing Scottish names being pronounced the wrong way by many broadcasters of other nationalities. So, I never pretend that I'm getting it 100% right. It's not going to be because, Portuguese, for example, is not my mother tongue. But what I can say is that I give it an honest effort to try to be as close as possible to the way a Portuguese person would say those names. So, we'll be doing that again on Friday.
Yeah, well, I rarely speak for the entire country and the entire Portuguese-speaking world, but we really, really appreciate that and have a lot of respect for the work that you put in to that. Another thing that I saw in that Boston Globe article from 2005, and again, I'll quote it here, is that you said that the internet has leveled the playing field for people like myself, whereas when I first came here to the States, it was very hard to keep up or keep tabs on anything that was happening in Europe. Nowadays, it's as easy to do it from the States, London, Glasgow, or Dublin. And I think, and you mentioned FIFA, I think that also with the FIFA video games and the FIFA video game franchise, that's also kind of leveled the playing field for younger generations and, generations that, I grew up playing video games, and Derek, no lie, I played it about an hour before our our interview here. But and I think especially here in the United States, I think for multiple generations of football and soccer fans, the FIFA video game and the FIFA franchise has been able to expose a non-footballing country to this wonderful sport, and has allowed people or fans of Manchester United and Real Madrid and Barcelona and AC Milan and Benfica and Porto and Sporting to not have to be in England and Portugal and Italy and so on and so forth. So with the internet and FIFA, quickly to go to FIFA, how did you get involved with the folks at EA? And I know that you've been now, according to the FIFA release, I think 5-6 years now since you've joined there. And how did that come about, and how have you enjoyed the experience?
It came about completely by chance. It's not something that you can put yourself forward for. You simply have to be approached. And I was approached not long after I'd left the UK. I left the UK in 2017 having worked there for almost a decade, and came back to the United States to embark upon a few freelance projects. And it was just a couple of months after that that I got a call from a third party saying that there was interest in me and my services from a big video game that wasn't specified at that point which video game it was, but then it emerged it was EA Sports. And it turns out that they had been following my career for a long time, going way back to the ESPN days of covering the Champions League. This would be the 2000s. And they had sort of made a mental note that they thought my style would be a good fit for the role of worldwide English language commentator on the game, should there ever be a need. And they got the Champions League rights at that time. So I think that's where the initial fit came in. They thought, okay, yeah, we'd quite like to see if that would work. So originally I was the Champions League and Europa League commentator. And then within a couple of years, it evolved to being the main voice for the whole game. And that's where we are at the moment. And I do very much enjoy it. It's a lot of work in the studio. When I say the studio, it used to be that we would go into a studio to do it. But since the start of the pandemic, we had to change our way of operating, and we simply built a studio in my home. So that's where we do it from now. So I roll up in my home studio, and we record for hours at a time. And we do this over many days, sometimes more than 20 in a year, not all at once, spread over.
Sure.
And yeah, it's become a big part of what I do. And I'm often sort of brought around to chuckling because younger people who maybe don't know my work from other places think that the only thing I do is FIFA. They think that hear me on an actual game and say, oh, I didn't know that you did actual games. I thought you only did FIFA.
Yeah, they're watching the World Cup and wondering why they don't have a controller in their hand, because they think that all of a sudden the video game came on.
Yeah, so somebody said that to me the other day. They said, with your voice, I'm used to pressing that controller and moving to here, there, and everywhere, and yeah, trying to get further on in the game. So yeah, that's been quite good fun. But it's definitely exposed my work to a different audience, and I'm grateful for that. And I love the work I do with the production team, with the audio team. I've got some great friends at EA Sports in Vancouver and in Köln in Germany as well, and so it's very much part of me now. And yeah, I don't take it for granted, but I love doing it. And yeah, we're very blessed, very lucky to do what we love as commentators. And in my case, obviously, FIFA has become just really important.
We're speaking with Derek Rae here on episode number 71 of the Seleção podcast. You, of course, can follow Derek on Twitter at RaeCom. That's RaeComm. We are finishing up with Rae because we know we have a very limited time with him and want him to get to his pressers and enjoy his day off here. But the pressing question, obviously, Derek, is: does Derek Rae play FIFA?
You wouldn't want to see me play FIFA. I do occasionally give it a go, but I have to say I'm not very good. I'm pretty hopeless, actually. What I tend to do, because what I want to do a lot of the time is see how my commentary is being used in the game, with a view to maybe changing one or two things in future years. So what I tend to do is I'll eavesdrop on better players than I playing the game, and I find that quite a useful exercise. But no, I would venture to say that most people in your audience who actually are FIFA players, if they were to take me on, yeah, it'd be a pretty resounding thrashing, and not in my favor.
If I could ask you just quickly about how you got your start, just to do it as well as you've done it. I assume that either the game of football or the art of broadcasting, or maybe a combination of both, had to be a passion of yours and a love of yours at a very early age.
Yes, absolutely. And I have my father to thank for taking me to my first game when I was 5 in Aberdeen, in Scotland, the northeast of Scotland, on the coast where I'm from. And I can still remember that first day when we went to Pittodrie Stadium to watch my local team. And that was a ritual for many years. So, yeah, as a Scot, we were immersed in it. And I decided fairly early on, I think, that I quite enjoyed talking about it. And 74 World Cup was the first one I can remember. And what I did during that World Cup was I would take a little recording device that we had at home, nothing like the recording devices that we have nowadays attached to phones, but a big sort of cumbersome recording device. And I would just talk into it and imitate the commentators. And I sort of pushed on from there, and then would take a portable version of the same thing and just commentate on games in the park and on the street. People would sort of laugh at me and think I was a little bit silly, a little bit kind of crazy. But then encouraged to do the same thing at Aberdeen reserve team games and then first team games. And by the time I was about 12, I was doing that at first team games. And we'd get a lot of very strange looks from the people on the stands. But I sent one of the tapes to the guy who was my commentary hero with BBC Radio in Scotland at that time, David Francie, legendary voice. There will have been equivalents, in Portugal. I remember listening to people like David Borges and Fernando Maciel in Porto. I met them both. David Francie was the equivalent of those guys in Scotland. And to my surprise, he replied to my letter, having listened to my cassette, and said, "Enjoyed your work. Keep it up. Here's some tips. Stay in touch." And we sort of did for a few years. And then I wrote to him again when I was 19. I was at university by this time, studying German and politics, and wasn't sure where it would go at that point. But this tells you a lot about David Francie, the human being. Instead of replying to me, he actually just gave it to his boss and said, "Have a listen to this." And so I got back from his boss, who said, I like how this sounds. Could you come down and talk to us when you get an opportunity? So I came down to Glasgow, 3 hours by train, and said, "We're going to try to, if you're agreeable, get you on the air soon." So they got me on the air, originally just to do some reports. But then my big break came when there was a game that required a commentator, because David Francie himself had a knee injury and there were no reserves available on that particular Saturday. It was close to the 86 World Cup and people had other commitments. And so I was thrust in to do Kilmarnock against Dumbarton, which was my first game on the air. And I thought, okay, well, I'm getting my chance here at 19. I was 19 at the time, and slightly unheard of. And I thought, okay, so I did it, and then went reasonably well. But when I got home, there was a message: could you call Charles Runcie, the head of sport? So I called Charles Runcie, the head of sport. He said, "Well done today." He said, "Okay." He said, "We have a second assignment for you if you would like to do it." And I said, "Oh, I wonder what this could be." And he said, "And the second assignment is to go to Wembley and do England against Scotland for us this midweek."
No big deal.
No big deal. So the second game, England against Scotland. And I think when you're that young, you don't get phased. You don't feel pressure the way I might do now. It's the remarkable thing about youth. And so that was the start of my BBC career. I was there for 5 years, and here we are. I've been doing it ever since for various different broadcasters, as you mentioned, for Fox at this World Cup. But I bounce around the channels, as people who watch a lot of football in the United States might know. And as I said earlier, it's just a real privilege to do something that you love, and you never take it for granted. But it's been a long time, and every World Cup in one role or another since 1990.
I won't ask you if you ever thought as a kid that you would be where you're at now, because I think that's silly. I mean, we never know what we're going to be when we're kids. But do you ever allow yourself to look back to where and how you started to where you are now, and be able to enjoy the success that you've had now for a little over 3 decades?
Ooh, what a question. I don't know. I think we always. It's funny. We're strange animals, those of us in the commentary business. You mentioned Ian Darke earlier, who's probably my best friend in this business, and we have breakfast every morning and lots of laughs. And we do often talk about the years that we spent trying to become better broadcasters, and the learning that goes on along the way. A lot of it is just human learning. A lot of it is just trying to pick up things as human beings, and hopefully being good human beings if we can. But I think we're quite serious people at the same time, commentators. We tend to fret and stress over things that a lot of other people might think are trivial. We tend to if one thing happens in a broadcast that doesn't quite go to plan, sometimes we can have a sleepless night over it, and more sensible people will say to us, that's ridiculous. Everybody, in any line of work, people have things that happen in their work that are not 100% smooth. But there's an element of the perfectionist about those of us who are commentators. We want things to be perfect, and I think I'm still trying to teach myself that perfection is something you strive for. But if you fall slightly short of that, don't beat yourself up so much. I always think about a football game, and in any football game, every footballer makes a mistake somewhere. Every referee makes a mistake somewhere. Maybe not every single game or every day, but there are mistakes, and I think we are part of that as well. We're talking live and unscripted for the best part of 2 hours. And I will say to people, try doing that and see if you could do it without misspeaking or without stumbling over something or making a mistake. So I'm still working on that part.
Well, the man who will be having the call between Portugal and South Korea this Friday for Fox Sports here in the States, Derek Rae, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to have you on the Seleção podcast. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I to be honest, Derek, not in a million years that I think we'd get you on so quickly, and it just is a credit to you as the professional and just the the nice guy in sports, which there seemed to be a lack of sometimes, but just an absolute honor and privilege to have you on the show, to have you on the Seleção podcast. I appreciate your time because I know it's limited. And I just wish you all the best the rest of the tournament and safe travels when you return home.
Danny, thank you very much. All the best to Portugal. All the best to everybody listening and watching. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Forza, Derek. Absolutely. And that was Derek Rae. It was an honor, as I mentioned, to have Derek Rae on this podcast. Again, I reached out to him just as a compliment to the way he does his pronunciations of Portuguese names, and that turned into him following the podcast, which I thought was wild right away. And then I sent him a message. I said, "Hey, if we could ever get you on this podcast, knowing your Fox obligations are many during this tournament, but if we could get you on, it'd be a great honor." And I would say a couple of hours later, he's like, "Yep, Fox is good with it. Let's try to figure something out." So, we found a day that he is off, which is rare, as I mentioned in the interview. I think the first match that he had was on June. I think I'm still thinking it's the Summer World Cup. Was November the 21st. He will have, by the time we get to Portugal and South Korea, it'll be 9 matches in 11 days, and then hopefully he'll get some spaced out matches once we get to the knockout stages. But again, it was an absolute pleasure and an honor to have Derek Rae on this podcast. So make sure you give him a follow at Raecom. That's RAECOMM. That will do it for the podcast here. Actually, not a quick note about Portugal and qualifying for the round of 16. I'm not here to say I told you so, because I didn't tell you so, but there were a lot of people, I would say a loud minority, that were ready to bury this team and say that they're not getting out of the group. They'll probably lose all 3 games, whatever. And the one thing I will say is that we can get frustrated with this national team, and rightfully so. I've been frustrated with this national team many times over. But I mean, once you get to the World Cup, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Has it been pretty? No. Has it been, even in the 2 matches that we've won, has it been a little frustrating? Yeah, I for sure. The Ghana match notwithstanding, we have a 3-1 lead. We're cruising hopefully to a 2-goal victory, and all of a sudden we get that goal scored against us late in the game. We almost have Diogo Costa cost us the win altogether, but we get the win against Uruguay, and we get ourselves in a position to win the group, which again could have been a loud minority, but I don't think there was an overwhelming majority who thought that this team would win the group. When however, whenever the draw came out or however we had been playing, we always go to a negative. And again, not always. We tend to go to a negative place with this national team when there's any little bit of struggle or just something that isn't to our liking. But with this team right now, and again, we have one more match against South Korea. We want to be injury free. We have a handful of players, I believe. I don't have it in front of me here, but off the top of my head, I think we have like João Felix, Ruben Dias, Bruno Fernandes on yellow cards. Those yellow cards don't come off until after the quarterfinals. So we still have to navigate what we hope are 3 matches at the very least to get those players off of yellow cards and to get anybody who accumulates another yellow card between now and the quarterfinals, to get them and be available, I should say, for what we hope is maybe a semifinal, hell, even a final run. But is it pleasant all the time to watch this team play football the way they do? No, but I'm enjoying the fact that we are atop the group as of this recording, that we control our destiny, which, we leave it up to the last second more times than not. We had qualification taken care of in 2 matches with one left to play. Now, we don't have the group yet, but it looks good. We have to play against South Korea, who played, I thought, a great game, an exciting game, I should say, against Ghana. They ended up on the losing end of that, but they're still alive. So that obviously is going to bear some relevancy to how they come out and play. And Portugal's got to be ready for that. They will not have Paulo Bento, their manager. He got the red card at the end of the Ghana match for talking with referee Anthony Taylor in a not so nice way. And I'm sure Paulo Bento was upset and said some things in English. I'm not so certain that he didn't say a couple of things in Portuguese, and then maybe some of the Korean that he's picked up as well. He was that pissed off. But all that to say is that just let's enjoy and be happy with these 2 wins. Let's enjoy hopefully what is a result against South Korea. Hopefully no injuries. Well, it'll be interesting to see how Fernand Santos kind of gives this lineup a change or maybe not a change. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can go. Sometimes maybe out of necessity or because we're trying to figure out what's what direction we want to go to with the round of 16 on the horizon. I thought Bruno Costa was huge. Diogo Costa. Why am I? Now I'm second guessing myself as if it's Diogo Costa. Good Lord. I saw something I think in one of the Portuguese newspapers that I think said something else. Said to Bruns, whatever. I'm keeping this in the podcast just because I'm not gonna I'll out myself here. But I thought he was huge against Uruguay. Obviously, I don't see any reason to make a change at goalkeeper. Nuno Mendes coming off the field after playing really, really well. According to Record, may be out for the rest of the tournament. So Fernando Santos has a decision to make on playing Rafael Guerreiro again at left back. Do you play João Cancelo, who has not been great, on the right side? Do you play him on the left and finally bring on Diogo Dalot to play on the right? Do you rest Cancelo because he's been struggling and play Guerreiro and Dalot at the fullbacks? At center back, good Lord. Pep, who I, for the life of me, did not think was going to be ready to play in this World Cup, had a very, very good game against Uruguay. And I thought showed out as he normally does for this national team. The question here is, do you rest him with qualification in the knockout stage secure? Do you play Ruben Dias on a yellow card? And you obviously, I think we're going to see the debut of Antonio Silva, it's just going to depend on who he's going to be playing with, whether it's going to be Pep or whether it's going to be Ruben Dias. If I had to guess, I'm going to guess it's going to be Ruben Dias playing with Antonio Silva in the middle of the defense and giving Pep some rest to save his legs for the knockouts here. So and with Danilo, that's another injury that came about after the Ghana game. Is he's got 3 fractured ribs or broken ribs. The initial report was that he was going to be out the rest of the group stage. I don't think broken ribs heal that quick to get him back in the knockouts unless it's maybe the final, if that. So you have 2 defensive starters from the Ghana match, or check that, 2 defensive starters from this World Cup and from qualifying and from the Nations League that are out. So Fernando Santos has obviously some decisions to make on that back 4, not only for South Korea, but obviously in the round of 16. Midfield-wise, a lot of talk about Palhinha replacing Ruben Neves. Maybe you have Mateus Nunes replacing Ruben Neves and having William play a more defensive mid. We had Eric Krakauer on in the last episode. The just vitriol for William Carvalho, I just still don't get. He was very solid again against Uruguay, a calming influence in the midfield as he normally is. A very good passer in the midfield and kind of settles things down in that midfield more times than not. I would expect him to be starting in big time matches for the duration of this tournament for however long Portugal's in. But do you give a guy like Bruno Fernandes a rest or Bernardo Silva a rest and bring in guys like, as I mentioned, Mateus Nunes or Vitinha to get them some time in the World Cup, and obviously up front as well. Do you play Cristiano Ronaldo a half? Do you play him at all? Do you give Rafael Leão, who I thought was not as good as he was against Ghana, against Uruguay? Do you give him a start? Do you keep playing João Felix, who is on a yellow card? At some point, you're going to have to figure out if you can rely on André Silva at all in this World Cup. Maybe it's the South Korea match. Gonçalo Ramos has played in spot duty. We have yet to see Ricardo Horta. Does he get some run? It's going to be interesting decisions for Fernando Santos for sure in the South Korea match on how he balances rest versus yellow cards versus bringing on youth. It's interesting, but it's a good position to be in because they've taken care of business in the first 2 matches. Again, have they been pretty? Absolutely not. Has the job been done? Absolutely. And when they play on Friday, Group H will play before Group G. So we won't know who our opponent will be after our match, other than we'll know, obviously, if we finish first or finish second. So the possibility of Brazil playing, or Brazil and Portugal, we will not know that until Brazil's game is over. So if Portugal wins the group and Brazil somehow finishes in second, we have that Portuguese-Brazil matchup that we thought would probably end up in reverse in terms of who would win the group, who would finish in second. But yeah, there's all to play for in this last match in terms of trying to position yourself as group winners. You want that, I think, in terms of a psychological thing for this national team, given how qualification for the World Cup and how the Euro qualifying of the last cycle, I don't want to call it a debacle, but just the struggles that they've had in closing out games at home in Portugal and in the Nations League and in qualifying. I think winning and qualifying as number 1 out of Group H would be something really positive for this national team that they can build on, hopefully in the round of 16, and hopefully a long run in this World Cup. Because if, again, as I mentioned in the last couple of episodes, if things go chalk, for the most part, the side of the bracket that Portugal would be on, I think is very winnable, at least in terms of getting to the semis. And then you just, at that point, you're looking at the 4 best teams anyway in the tournament. And by all means, anything can happen. But I think Portugal is in a very strong position in this World Cup. And we shall see how everything goes on Friday against South Korea. If Portugal finishes first or second, and then who they will get on Saturday, Saturday would be the quarterfinal. Well, who we would play next week in the round of 16. We'll just go from there. But yeah, it's exciting times. It's not the prettiest of times, but it's exciting times, and this team is putting itself in a position to do very, very well, I think, in this World Cup. So that will do it for us here on episode number 71 of the Seleção podcast. Again, my thanks to the absolute legend that is Derek Rae for coming on and spending some time with us on the Seleção podcast. He, of course, is the play-by-play announcer for Fox Sports he's one of the play-by-play announcers for Fox Sports at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. He's also the voice of the FIFA Video Game franchise. And just an absolute honor to have him spend some time with us here on the podcast. And hopefully you guys enjoyed watching and listening. Make sure you guys hit that like button on YouTube. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Obviously, I want this episode to do really, really well. And you guys can help that by just hitting that like button as many times as you possibly can, and sharing this video and this episode on YouTube or from YouTube and all of our podcasting platforms. Again, follow us on Twitter at Seleção Pod. Follow us on Instagram as well at Seleção Pod. Facebook.com/Seleção Pod. And you can email the show seleçãopod@gmail.com and bookmark our website, seleçãopod.com. That will do it for us here on episode number 71 of the Seleção podcast, a proud partner of Portugal.net. And as always, Força Portugal!